open with this morning is to ask truly, not just if we are content, because I feel as though in my own life, I actually am willing to put up with more than I might actually ask other people to put up with. I'm willing to tolerate more because based on how I assess things, it's more of a hassle to have to see about this, so make sure I have that. It's not always necessary. Case in point, you know, an old car driving around, no AC, had it fixed, it broke again. At some point, car was so old, I just thought I'll just deal without not having a car with AC. Now, I would never tell a friend of mine, hey, suck it up, I do it, because I understand that, look, just because I'm willing to deal with something doesn't mean that other people are willing, and it also doesn't mean other people should. I say that because generally speaking, for both good and bad, we tend to not judge other people's situation as easily as we would our own, or vice versa. So with regards to the state of the country, if we only look at it through the lens of our own life, our own existence, our own quality of life or lack thereof, there might be some of us who are saying, well, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need the other. I might not need a good education. I was looking to do something that didn't need education. It's not a big deal for me. The problem is, and I think then the mistake extends to parents thinking that whatever was good for me is good enough for the children, for both good and bad. If I was a doctor, then my children need to be doctors. If I was a carpenter, well then my children sometimes should be willing to be carpenters. Sometimes not. Sometimes the parents want more for their kids. And there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways for all of that. But there is that sense of, I think it's a mistake of thinking, if I go through something, other people could go through something. Well, why? When I went to secondary school, classrooms didn't have AC. Now they have some schools with AC and some schools without. And I'm not saying that, ooh, we should just, our children are too soft, they shouldn't have AC. Well, climate is changing and things are getting rough out there. But I would rather hope that we could figure out a way, I don't know if we could afford it, for all school children to have that benefit. I mean, at the end of the day, they need to learn and they need a good environment to learn in. But we're far from that. That, I guess, to some extent is progress, right? Understanding that just because older generations sacrifice doesn't mean that we have to continue sacrificing. What's the point of saying we have progress when we're not moving forward? So to what extent is our tolerance of our situation because we are willing to accept it for ourselves? And we're not thinking about what happens down the line. Are we really willing to accept it for the next generation? For the generation after that? Not all of us have kids, so we're not going to think along those lines either. And maybe it's a tall ask. If you don't have children with no expectations or intentions of having children, to ask you to think about the next generation. But at the end of the day, wouldn't you have liked it for people in your position to think about you when you were the young ones, when you weren't even a thought in your parents' head? At the end of the day, the country is not something. You have shoes, they're your shoes. No one else wears your shoes. You have clothes, they're your clothes. You could lend out your clothes. Some women do. Men, not so much into that habit. But you can if you want to, but they're still yours, technically speaking. yours to deny lending. And you could say that down the line of personal possessions. A country is not like that. We all own a piece of the country. Essentially, this is timeshare. Our ownership is dependent on our life. And once we pass, the timeshare shifts to the next owners, the next generation. We treat it as though it's ours, all the while mistreating it per se, because we tolerate so much, because we're so caught up with the now. And maybe we could argue that previous generations and the older heads, they made mistakes that we're paying for now. But why must we then think it's all right? Oh, well, we had to pay for some of their mistakes. Well, then the next generation had to pay for some of ours. Why? That is not progress. There was a point in time when there was a lot of pride being from Trinidad and Tobago, but perhaps too much of that pride came from our wealth. Wealth that was not necessarily earned completely by our sweat and by our effort. We just landed on it. And now that it's drying up, we no longer have the luxury of being the nouveau rich that just struck it big, acting like I never see come see, being all arrogant in our comforts, thinking, nothing bad is going to happen until it does, until reality is now slapping us across the face in terms of cost of living, in terms of a 450 plus murder rate with 11% detection rate, in terms of worsening economic prospects for our young people, despite the fact that we supposedly have education for all. We have too many people still illiterate. Too many of my friends, myself included, have been slowly but surely having to pinch more pennies down the line. And I could feel it and I could see it. We're not talking the greatest of creature comforts. We ain't talking about vacations all the time or fancy restaurants. We're talking basic takeout every now and then has to be reduced. Fast food is a luxury that has to be denied due to a lack of money. It's one thing if it was only us who had to deal with the consequences, but it's not just us. That's the nature of a country, of a nation, of a society. That's one of the reasons why it's so complex. It's an advanced way to live. We are not just but 1.5 million hermits seeing about our own lives. We have come together to form a collective. And dare I ask, how many social groups have you been a part of throughout your lifetime that has crumbled for the most mundane and unfortunate reasons? And while the country is not going to totally crumble to that extent, it's almost like if that's what's happening. We all agree that we want things to go well. Why then is it so hard for us to decide to do something to make things better? All right, Shawn Michaels, more lessons talking about on WSND Content Capital. A lot to get through. And then, of course, we have the good lady later on today. But before we get to that, let's start off today's daily review. First story today, one of the things that caught my eye immediately, something that I totally agree with Mr. Brown, at the Summit of the Future at the United Nations, he called for more international collaboration. Now, technically, he did not limit it to the main point that I want to speak about. The main point, of course, is with regards to gun smuggling, the illicit gun trade, the ease of access to illegal firearms, particularly in our region. But he also, of course, just to mention with regards to international cooperation for other things like sustainable development, cybersecurity, other aspects of progress with regards to technology and allowing the global community to move together as a whole. He also included some messages for that. I think the underlying principle, we could start there, is the sense of, look, we are too interconnected. The issues of one nation could then be a vulnerability because it could spread to other nations. To some extent, I think we're seeing that with regards to Venezuela. It's less clear if Haiti is contributing significantly to the reduction in security of the region, maybe more so for its immediate neighbors. But then again, I don't have access to SSA intelligence, assuming it is good enough. But the whole thing about a global community then brings up the question about to what extent or degree are we going to hold on to concepts and principles of individual national sovereignty above all other things. Because when you think about sovereignty, it's not just, well, it's our laws and we enforce our laws. The more you go down that line of thinking, the more you essentially are pointing towards independence in the sense of not just political independence, but independence in the sense of not having to rely on anybody else on anything. That's, if you want to champion sovereignty above all other things, you to some extent have to be prepared to be a rhetorical island, not just a literal one. So, I myself have said with regards to crime, we should ask for help. Right now, arguably, we don't have the economy, we don't have the assets. It is questionable if we have the personnel across all sectors of national security. Right? This is not just limited to the TTPS. And then on top of that, particularly for things like border security and the illegal gun trade, the TTPS is the last line of defense, one could argue. That's when the guns already are in here. The first line of defense are other agencies. Now, Minister Brown making this call to the UN, I do wonder to what extent is this a declaration of substantial policy by the current administration? This is basically a year before, or less than a year before the next election, depending on when it's called. Some people think we should be prepared for a snap election called sooner rather than later after the budget, maybe not. Regardless, the months of this term of office, they're basically at the lower end of the scale. This is the end of this term. Whether or not they're re-elected, that will be decided on a later date. So, sometimes when you come to the end of a term, you might say things that you may not have said if you had 5 years ahead of you. Because you're not necessarily sure you want to fully commit to it. But maybe they are, because they have some degree of confidence of winning the next election. Maybe they are. The thing is it a policy shift? Or have they been asking for aid and there have been technical issues or foreign hesitancy? Or like I said, is it a shift? And we haven't really been asking it before, and now is this a sign that we're more willing to ask for foreign aid? Because The cynics will say, some people will say, why would they actually want to get foreign aid to help deal with illegal gun smuggling? Because it might also hamper the illegal drug smuggling. And how many finances may or may not have links to illegal drug smuggling? We don't know. The cynics will say that. To some extent, it would be a fair question to ask, to what degree is that concept true? To what degree is criminal money interfering with our political system? That's not to say that if they don't actually get substantial help, that proves that there is drug money in campaign financing. It doesn't prove that. Because there are other reasons. One of it, of course, is what I mentioned before, this concept of sovereignty. There seems to be, to some extent, a hesitancy to give up some of our sovereignty. And let's be clear, therein lies the catch with the whole global village concept. The more interlinked we are with other countries and the more linked they are to us, and given the fact that we import most of our food, they are very much linked to us whether we realize it or not. Culturally, they are linked to us. To say that 2024 Trinbagonian culture is completely indigenous to ourselves and is not influenced by foreign culture would be wishful thinking. I mean, even our traditional culture was influenced by foreign culture way back in the colonial age and the industrial age and so on and so on. That's why we have all these French names and Spanish words and different European-styled cultural traditions or traditions born from their traditions, some of which we're assessing, some of which we've just renamed the Queen's Hall, street signs, etc., etc. So we're not completely independent, but sovereignty. Do you want to give up our sovereignty? The EU is an example of going further along that ideological path. And it has worked in some ways and it has failed in others. One of the things it potentially has failed in is in security. The thing is, Minister Brown has asked for it. He has said it publicly. It is a message. The question is it a significant one or an insignificant one? Is it a major talking point or a minor speaking point? Will what he said be backed up with substantial government effort or not? Therein lies the question. And I'm not necessarily confident that it will be. Mainly because when it comes down to it, it's not even with regards to thinking bad of the government, thinking bad of politicians, thinking bad of both sides of the aisle with regards to their intentions or their motivations or what have you. It actually comes down to one simple thing. Change, substantial change, for whatever reason, does not come easily in general with regards to any government, but think about it. When have we seen any true substantial change? When? Our road networks have not necessarily gone through significant amounts of development or progress. Our economy, our government bureaucracy, how we do policing, our Coast Guard, our agriculture, our tourism products, carnival. Culturally, what part of TNT is an example in recent history that shows that we are willing to push for change? It's literally just the lack of change in the track record that makes me a cynic to say, we're not going to ask for it. We're too proud, we're going to do it ourselves and potentially continue to fail at it. History will show if I am correct or not. And of course, there's a lot of details in between. But we'll have to hold off on the conversation for now. I could hear that the good lady has arrived, so let's take a break. When we come back, we will continue looking towards the future. Of course, something important is coming up next week, and we will begin our look towards what may or may not come in the budget with some harsh realities potentially, depending on your point of view. Stay tuned to Talk About WESN. We'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to Insta. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have two of the three species of anteaters right here.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of
not
Let's go to the last part.
are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
In the studio, now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and, I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
And we're back on talking about our WSN Content Capital Show. Michael Smallhead, joined by the good lady herself. She is, of course, a former Minister of Finance, which is even more relevant now at this point of the year than at any other time because she's had a hand. She's seen how the sausage is made with regards to our budget coming up next week, Monday. So, of course, we welcome the good lady, Karen Shishera. Good morning, Karen.
Yes, good morning to you, Sean. So, yeah, we're going to do a little kind of pre-budget and look at what we can expect from the Mr. Imbut. I want to start first by saying that he's probably going to, as he usually does, sing his own praises. There's a good thing about being positive, but there's another thing about coming across as arrogant and living in a la-la land, which he lives in, and not looking at the reality. And it's unfair to the people of Trinidad and Tobago what he does. And why do I say that? Because the country, the economy, there's two things, the economy, and we use that word economy and crime, but that's a very broad statement. But when we talk about the economy, we're talking about people being able to get a living wage, other than you being in the public service. Those persons who want to start a small business or a tiny little micro business, persons who want to be able to find a job in the private sector that is going to be not a food franchise or a low-paying job that takes them nowhere. So if you're looking from that point of view, as a Trinidadian and Tobagonian, what you want from a government is to be able to have a decent living. You don't have to be driving a BMW or Mercedes, but have a decent sense of living that you could feed your family, that you could go on a holiday every now and again. That is what you want, and we should want that for a country that has always touted the oil or energy sector. And then when it comes to the broad-term crime, yes, we talk about it in how it really does affect us. That is, over 476 murders for the year, and we now are nearly towards the end of September. What is it going to be the end of the year? But it's not only that, it's the detection rate. I understood one of the persons that they held by Minister Dialson, they had to release him. Yeah. And then the remand is even before they even decide whether you should stand trial. They have, from my recollection when I had done some research on it, you have hundreds of young men sitting in remand, hundreds of young women sitting in remand, waiting for a day to decide whether or not they should stand trial. And then the detection rate is not there. There's so many things that are wrong with our crime-fighting initiatives when we all know Trinidad is a narco state. We all know that. I don't know why we pretend we don't know that. I don't know why the Prime Minister pretends he doesn't know that. That's how I think he does, he and his ministers. So all of those efforts that you would put in, yes, we agree those things are necessary to deal with the crime, but unless you go to the cause, you will never solve the crime. And that's why we have never solved the crime situation, because they are not prepared to deal with the cause. And the Americans have told us that. They have told us we have a transnational organization operating in our country. We have a proliferation of gangs whose business is unlicensed guns and being involved in the cocaine trade. So there's no question that what is driving a lot of the crime and then the offshoot of that has to be coming from our lack of border control and the fact that we have not been able, I just don't even want to go down that route. So the point about it is that the economy and crime are really the big issues for the average Trinidadian. So what about this budget? What's going to be different? One of the things I do like about the budget, our budget, is that it does follow a clear pattern, so it's easy to follow, because I've seen other countries where it's not that straightforward. So they deal with the global outlook, they look at the regional outlook, and then they look more now at domestic outlook, and then they look at specific initiatives that the government has an update on them or where they have reached with those initiatives. And then they come to the very important thing, the revenue that they expect to obtain or to be able to fund the expenditure. And the expenditure, so we have the revenue on one side and the expenditure on the other side. And that's where the appropriation from the revenue, which is all in the consolidated fund, it has to be transferred from the consolidated fund to the various ministries. And it's all a mirage, because how could you have 15 years, except 1 year, 2022, of fiscal deficits, which means that your revenue is never enough to cover your expenditure? How are you getting it wrong every single time? And 2022 was a happenstance. They call it serendipity. It had nothing to do with us. I mean, it's a bad reason that Ukraine and Russia went to war, but because of that, that's why oil and gas prices went up. And the minister has gone on record with the Revenue Authority to say that we are an energy-producing economy, and without the oil and gas, we are simply in deep trouble, economic trouble. The Prime Minister has gone on record on that. So this thing of what to expect from this budget, well, I would like to know how he's going to come to the revenue, because that's what you have to be concerned with, what is his revenue? He can't just tell you, I dropped the natural gas price from $6 to $5. I didn't look this morning, but what is the price of natural gas? But we do know that oil, which you use, the oil prices already, why are we using it? We're not refining anything, and it has dropped.
$2.61.
And that's where it's been.
Slightly.
Yeah, it ranges between 2 something.
But the variance is literally a couple cents.
Right. So
in fact, the variance is less than
I wrote it down actually, and I see since 2022, writing it down. I went to the central bank as my source, by the way. The price, not only do we have the natural gas price that could come near to $5, which he put it at and gave no explanation, he did it to increase the revenue. To give the impression, because remember, it's a projection of what you intend to make in the year, which is this year that we now completed, right? And it came nothing near to that. In fact, he took $2.3 billion out of the consolidated fund. He took 336 million US out of the HSF fund, right? What is he doing that for? To increase revenue. And in a way, the fact that he did not have to make any the fuel subsidy, there was no monies paid to households for the fuel subsidy. All of those things, a combination of reduction of some of the expenditure, and also floating bonds, borrowing up to the wazoo. The last one he borrowed was $750 million, right? So even the central bank says, the central bank report, energy sector continues downwards. I mean, they had so many articles on this. I spoke about it last week, so I won't go back in detail. But I want to know, I guess I'll get it indirectly, I would like to know what he's going to put as the revenue figure, because he can't be using the oil, because the oil also, the barrels of oil per day, has also been on the downward slide. I think just a month or so ago, it actually reached 43,000 barrels. But it's around 50-something thousand barrels. We're not relying on oil.
Yeah.
Okay, and the tax, you have to look at the revenue. Revenue is the tax, It's the tax. And when you look at what the central bank, I got the information from the central bank. They said that is supplemental. How do they get their revenue from the oil and energy sector? The government revenue climbed by 5.5 billion to 35 billion due to fall in energy prices and production. This is the central bank, and not me saying this. And the supplemental petroleum tax is where they get their money from. I mean, that's where they get the revenue from. The taxation fell by 8.4 billion. Royalties and non-tax revenue fell by 1.5 billion and 2.3 billion, generally speaking. Our growth has gone, IMF said, I've said all of this before. So I am just wondering, how is he, I mean, it's almost as though he knows already that he's not going to reach that revenue position. And part of it, in my respectful opinion, is one, he puts a high price because he wants to uplift the revenue because it's so bad. And he also doesn't want to put money in the HSF, but he keeps on taking money out of the HSF, right? He knows it's not going to reach the that, because I would like him to explain how he's reaching at the number that he's going to reach.
Because I just like to point out, it's almost annual where we get reports that the HSF is back to somewhere around 5 to 6 billion.
Because they're taking money out of it.
He's always happy for it reaching back to that point, as opposed to where it's actually seeing growth.
And because so much money is being taken out of the HSF.
Yes, that's never highlighted.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very sad situation that every year for the last 15 years, and in fact, he said it in his own witness statement to the Revenue Authority, that the Standard & Poor's said, listen, if you can't get your fiscal position in, balance, we are going to have to downgrade you. Now, if they downgrade us, they're downgrading you to junk status, because we're just on the cusp of being downgraded. And as a result of which, even the central bank says that we're paying more in interest rates when we borrow. So a lot of the money in the foreign exchange, I mean, just look at the facts. You don't have to, I just want to know where he's getting his revenue from. And that is why, let me just say, that's why he went so hard on the property tax. He knew, I want to tell you, if that had gone to court, to whatever ends up to be our highest court in this country, I am telling you that he would have been found, just like with the local government issue, he would have lost that case. And the reason he would have lost that case, under the property tax laws, people do not get to have to pay tax the day after they get notice of how much in taxes. It's not as if the tax was the same as it was under the former legislation. So when you introduce a new tax regime and you implementing it, you have to give me notice, and they give me 2 days, 3 days, 4 days notice. No court in this law, in this land, or wherever we have to go, would uphold it. But you know what he wanted to do? Do you realize the date was the 30th of September? Yep. I was told 3 weeks ago that the 30th of September was going to be budget day. Do you know why? 30th of September is the last day in the fiscal year. So he wanted as much as possible to get as much revenue when he has to send it to the Auditor General. As much revenue as possible before the fiscal year was over. That is why he knew in advance. He knew in advance that people did not get their notice of assessment. He knew in advance there would be objections. He knew in advance that the 30th of September was unrealistic, but he did not care.
For objections, there's supposed to be a tribunal.
Right, there's no tribunal set up.
Right.
Yeah, but he doesn't, and that is to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, how serious our economic situation is. When you see that he has to run after you for property tax, knowing full well he could not, and had poor people standing up in his sun, knowing full well that the 15th of September and the extension of 30th of September, he knew full well many people did not get their notice of assessment. He knew full well he could not make that. It was unfair to them to ask me to give me something one day and pay the next day. The property tax does not operate like that. Everybody could have known before what their property tax was for the next year. You know why? Because valuation division is charged with changing the valuation on your property for purposes of taxation. So if the valuation division couldn't do it, and they are part of the Ministry of Finance, you knew that they could not make the deadline. But that's not what you were concerned about. You were concerned about your revenue position, because guess what? Your oil and gas, you have 1.4 billion less of shortfall. Yeah, thank you. Shortfall of natural gas. That is what you have. And Dragonfield is off the table for the moment. You know that. Too much things going on between Venezuela and America. You know that is off the table. Lauren is off the table, and the other gas fields, Shell gave up some of their gas fields except one because the overhead, the cost of keeping those gas fields which mature didn't make sense for Shell. You know that even if all these gas fields finally provide gas, it's still not going to give you the 1.4 billion. So I don't know. I fault this government, and this is my major fault. You did not need a crystal ball. You did not need Yosina Gonzalez to tell you what the Ministry of Energy has known for a long time. The Prime Minister had to know, and the Minister of Finance had to know that we could no longer rely on natural gas. Downstream industries, they're telling you already, urea, ammonia, and methanol. Urea, ammonia prices have dropped since 2022. I went and looked it up from central bank statistics. Methanol has told you they're giving you 1 million less. And a lot of them are shuttering and leaving Trinidad to go to America because all fracking is going to be reintroduced. It doesn't make sense. So you know that the petrochemical industries is in serious trouble. They're not going to get the revenue that you expected. You know that LNG is owned by Shell and BP. You have only a 10% hold. So you have to give them the gas first, and also a domestic market. You know how serious it is, yet you made not one real, meaningful, sustainable, developmental effort to give us other streams of earning foreign exchange. And yet you want me to praise you for keeping them balls from falling on the ground, which they will fall just now. People, you heard it from me, it's going to fall just now. Because Standard & Poor's, and I'm telling you, you cannot continue financing your revenue with borrowing. And that is what you cannot keep on taking money out of the Heritage Stabilization Fund in order to finance your revenue. You cannot continue like that.
I think it's important when we get these reports that says, oh, we have a good amount of reserves. The problem is the reserves are basically one-time use. You can't just endlessly take $1 billion from the HSF for the next 10 years. There's only 6. You have to
understand something. It's not a reason. No. You have to understand these funds serve different purposes. You have the Infrastructural Development Fund, which is for infrastructure. They have done nothing. What they're going to claim is they got revenue. Where they got the revenue? From selling, which is very sad, the 58.3% ownership of Clico in Proman for how much? 337 million to Proman. And that is what they do, selling off things that they didn't even own. And HSF is not intended to be used how they're using it. It is an investment vehicle like Norway, like Sweden, like the Middle East, like every other country. Like a sovereign wealth fund not supposed to be growing. Right, it is not there for you to take out or substitute your...
But the point is, even when the foreign agencies point at this as a good thing, we need to understand that's not sustainable revenue. That's money that if we use, it's gone forever.
No. The foreign agencies and the borrowers, by the way, interest rate has gone up, that is their guarantee to get paid.
Oh, yeah.
That's their guarantee to get paid. They know that push come to shove, the HSF could pay them back. And if you're looking at our foreign exchange reserves, I am not saying it, all the economists have said it, and the facts are there. We and the central bank have said it, most of the money in our foreign exchange reserves is tied up with loans that have to be paid in US currency, so that we can't talk about our foreign exchange. It dropped from 10 billion to 5-point-something billion. And most of it is bonds that we have floated on which the government has to pay it back in US currency, and which they're using the HSF as their guarantor. That's in case they can't pay it back because they don't have the revenue. They turn to the HSF, as they have done time and time again. So let us be real. And even the appropriation to ministries, don't you realize that something is wrong? That the Ministry of Health never has enough money. Education can't fix the schools. They can't do what they're supposed to do. All the national security, every single one of them say they are underfunded. So that figure that is put as the expenditure I think is a fanciful figure. Because why every year you all have a deficit? And this year's deficit, according to the central bank, is 9.6 billion. That was in May when he did the mid-year review. So why is it that it has something to do with the amount of revenue. It's not so much expenditure, because the expenditure more or less stays about the same. It's your revenue, and you know you're not getting the revenue, yet you will not diversify and earn because it's too much trouble.
Is it fair to say that so many things that you're talking about now, the warning signs have been, including by you, but also economists in various ways, been speaking about these things for the last couple of years at the very least? And people who want to say, well, things are not bad yet, but you're basically pointing to, well, no, we've been talking about these things for the last 3 to 5 years. They've been slowly getting worse 3 to 5. Why is it seems like some people have an expectation it will magically get better?
Because they put it in head in the sand, among other places. But so what he will be saying that is good is he got the property tax started. But it is so unfair if they take him to court to try and tell me I had to pay that thing by 30th of September. Go to the highest court in this that we have, and I bet you they lose, just like with the local government. You cannot come before, when you paid property tax under the old system. You knew what it was because it hadn't changed in 20 years.
Right.
Right? So you had the whole year to know what it was. You cannot come to me on Thursday to tell me on Friday I have to pay this. Where am I getting $2,000-3,000 to pay? You have to give me time, and then you. So that property tax is a complete mess. But he didn't mind. He wanted that revenue, and September the 30th was his deadline to collect that revenue. That's the end of the fiscal year. When it comes to the Revenue Authority, all this talk about how they won. Let us be clear. You have to read the Privy Council decision. The issue was, could you take public servants and put them into an authority and therefore effectively make them private citizens carrying out government work? They have had cases decide Perch versus the Attorney General. There are a number of cases already decided. The government knew that they didn't win anything. It was already determined that the Parliament sets the policy and you implement it by the assessing and collection. You are doing what the law says to do. So you didn't win. Jamaica has a revenue authority. Barbados has a revenue authority. Guyana has a revenue authority. That was not a win. You know where you're in trouble with? Two things. The VSEP you're going to have to pay for those people who you have no job to put them in. And secondly, which the Privy Council brought up. The Privy Council brought up, you have to read the case. I think I page 24. I don't know why. I think I put a note of it. On the issue of enforcement. They left enforcement in the public service. And do you know something? I could say that personally, because when we were in government, one of the reasons we wanted to take BIR and especially customs outside of the public service was we wanted to be able to hire, fire, transfer, dismiss, discipline. You wanted that authority. Discipline, and not only, and promote.
Right.
Right? You wanted to have that control. And the major area in Revenue Authority where most of the issues arise is the Enforcement Division. And guess where it is? It's in the public service. And you know why? Because when we passed the legislation in 2010, and Mr. Mann then Peru Parliament, we had a 3/5 majority. We lost that 3/5 majority. So in order for them to pass that law without needing a 3/5 majority, they took the Enforcement Division and left it in the public service. But the Privy Council has said it's not clear. Is the officers working in the authority who collecting and assessing, do they have powers of enforcement? And what do you mean, what kind of powers of enforcement do they have? Do they have the power of detention? Do they have the power of arrest? So that Revenue Authority is not over, right? So you could go and boast that you won what? That was a given that you were going to get permission. The case law was there already, right? The question is, can you implement it? Well, let's see. What about the Gambling Commission? You said you were going to pass your regulations. Everywhere on Arapita Avenue or everywhere you go in Trinidad is a set of gambling things, small, big, all kind of size. Everybody knows, I'm not saying any of them in particular, but it's well known, it's used for money laundering. And you had the procurement regulator say exactly what the former procurement regulator said. $5 billion, she accounted, said that based on reports of bid rigging, bribery, etc., it's amounted to about $5 billion. Exactly what she was saying.
You have the procurement regulator bringing it up. You have the Auditor General, which we haven't even gotten this last audit resolved, and we're going to have one coming up not too long from now. And of course, we've had some economists, some regional economists talk about foreign exchange that may or may not, we can't necessarily account for it. That might be one way to put it, right? So with regards to foreign exchange though, that's one of the other things that when we were speaking yesterday, I don't think people realize how foreign exchange position could get worse. We already have people saying, oh gosh,
but
they're so wicked.
Most of it is that. Just imagine you had a business run by your father and he had money in the bank and he had 5 million in the bank and 4.5 billion he owes to people. How much money you really have, right? Then he's going to talk about inflation. Look where the inflation, you know why inflation is so low? And the central bank said people are saving but they're not putting money in the bank. Well, I want to know what they're saving, number one. What they're saving. Yes. Why are they putting it under the mattress? It could be two reasons. They have no faith in the banking system. The interest rates are zero. I would like to know. And they may not want to put whatever they have in the bank because they can't put it in the bank.
Well, to me, I think for middle class families and below, saving is now one of those hard choices of not how much we save, but rather if we save at all, because can we afford to save?
No, the central bank said people are saving. He said they are saving, but he said they are not putting their money into the bank.
I would like to know then, how do they know that?
Well,
who is saving? It could be the upper socioeconomic bracket might be saving. I don't know about.
Well, what I gathered with him out in is he didn't explain why. But if we have to take a good guess, is either they have no confidence in the bank because the bank charging you for every little thing that you do.
Well, there you go.
Right?
Yes.
And secondly, maybe it's money you can't put in the bank for some reason, so you have to keep it under your mattress. Right?
Didn't they want to go through another exercise of changing bills again like last time? Anyway, I'll leave that there.
And then inflation rate. Don't be proud about a 0.7% interest rate because you have to tie the interest, inflation rate. Because that means nothing is happening in the economy. And you know why you know nothing happening in the economy? Because the central bank won't raise the repo rate. The repo rate is an indication if there is too much money circulating in the system, they raise it because they want to tighten and get money out of the system.
Yeah.
When they're leaving the repo rate at 3.50 for the last 6-7 years, it's because there's no money in the system. You know how you know that too? The reserve requirement for the central bank, for banks, they said you had to keep 14% in reserve. They dropped it to 10%. Why? Because they want to have liquidity in the system. And listen, I could just go on and on about...
But then also we have to look at the fact the Fed last week, I think, dropped the American interest rate, right?
0.50 basis points using their language.
There is intention to go further.
Yes.
So it reached a point where they're no longer...
Because they want to tighten, they're trying to tighten
No, they've reduced.
Yes.
So they're no longer as worried as about inflation as opposed to growth, right?
Right.
But then, of course, if inflation creeps up there, we import all our food from there, we could see it here, not so?
I mean, you know what I really want to say? It's a mirage. It has to be a mirage, these budget statement from the minister. Because you cannot be running fiscal deficits every single year, except 2022 because of the Ukraine war. Something is wrong with what you project as your revenue, which has no reality with the position of our natural gas price and production. It has no bearing on that. And the oil, it does not come into play because we don't produce much oil and we close down the refinery. In fact, Paria fuel costing us money because we have to import all the oil, the fuel that the refinery used to produce, and they're using up foreign exchange. I want to know how he's going to come with, and then also too, the central bank said it, that when it comes to payment of contractors and persons who do work for various ministries, he says there's a delay, and I think he used another terminology, between the receipt by the ministry or whichever government or entity for payment and actual receipt of payment. So people are not and there's a $2.5 billion outstanding in VAT refunds. So you don't understand? And then they go to, and then the Clico sale of ProMan is their capital. That is what they did in their capital development.
Is there any chance that...
It's a game.
Is there any chance that they might be unaware of what's going on in the economy for the people on the ground, the politicians?
Are you joking? I was inside there.
I'll say this. I was actually surprised by how much new expensive cars have been on the road within the last year. I don't know
But that's where
if they're
from.
just looking at things like that and they're willfully just pulling the wool over their own eyes saying, everything is fine, you see all the new cars
But
on
who
the road?
it is, let's have as a percentage, how many people do not have their children go to school because they cannot pay for transportation?
I know, but how many politicians, how many MPs and senators are in social circles to even be aware of that?
But this is a government, this is the people you're supposed to see about, and WASA not.
There you go.
By the way, ICNTT said they've been owned billions of dollars, and you want who owes ICNTT billions of dollars? The government.
The government
WASA,
every year.
Who owes WASA billions of dollars is the government. Don't you understand? It's just a mirage. It's a fantasy. So you see the fantasy you're going to see this year, another fantasy of the revenue, and another fantasy of the expenditure, and another fantasy of a big deficit the following year, and some explanation that is going to make them look good.
Do you, obviously it's too hard to ask you to give details of what you think will happen in specifics, but you expect how they treat the estimate for the price of oil and gas to be similar, right? Do you think that the budget for the most part will also be quite similar to what we've seen in the last couple of years, or do you think that there might be any kind of change, any kind of divergence?
Okay, well, what I will say is remember what you're doing is projecting the future. So it's up to you. You could call any number you want, really, right? So he could put what I think he probably will do. All those appropriations to the different ministries. Why they're underfunded? Why can't they fix the schools? Why they can't do it? Because they don't have the money. Why they're not paying the contractors? Something is wrong. So you're saying you have put money and appropriate money to this ministry, but at the end of the day, these ministries are not able to pay because they simply do not have the money from the consolidated fund to do that. Why are you floating so many bonds? Why are you taking money out of HSF? And one thing, in fairness to the government, I think the government should do this in fairness to themselves, actually. Because I see people say that 57% of the funding goes to transfers and subsidies. And people generally think that when you use that terminology, they tend to only hear subsidies.
Right.
And I think it's incumbent on the government, because when I looked at, I think it was Central Bank, out of that 57%, I think it's only 33% goes to subsidies, and included in subsidies is education.
Oh,
yes,
the whole...
Yeah, so of the 57%, only subsidies to households make up only 1/3 of that 57%. And that is the disability grant, the food grants, and so on, but also education, right? That also goes into, the tertiary education, those GATE and so on, right? And they need to say that. And also, they have to say a lot of the transfers are transfers to HSF, which they didn't make this year, transfers to Infrastructural Development Fund, transfers to the Green Fund, and also transfers to statutory entities, which on the face of it seem to be making money. The face of it seem to be doing very well. But I think they need to clarify the difference between a transfer and a subsidy to household, because people get the impression when they talk that, the government's spending all the money on CPEP, and which the local government gets its allocation, and now I see they've taken money for CPEP and URP in time for a new election, I suppose. But I think they need to make the clarification between the two so that we know what is going for subsidies to households, because the fuel subsidies, it made zero, because there was nothing to give, right? And they should really identify what percentage goes to households and what constitutes transfers to state enterprises, to the HSF, to the IDF, to the Green Fund, or to other funds. We need to get some clarification on that.
That's the thing. I think ultimately we need to understand that it's not as though there isn't external factors that we need to be aware of and to consider to be fair to assess the government. What we can criticize is then the decisions made with those factors in that context and framework. So it'll be a very interesting thing to see what this budget is going to look like.
As he going to mention Dragonfield and Lauren.
Of course he will. With that said, of course he will. With that said, I don't know how he's going to do it though. Let's take a break. When we come back, we open the phone lines. You could call in and have your say. Of course, property tax. We didn't necessarily speak too much on it, but we got the new date for the new deadline. You could call in on that. You could call in on any issues you have on that. Of course, anything to do with the economy or anything else for that matter, what I've spoken about or did not speak about, what Karen spoke about, did not speak about, all that and more. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
And we're back on Talking Point here on WSND Content Capital. First caller on the line. Just a reminder, do not try to have the conversation through the television. Listen to us through your phone when you're on the air. Good morning, caller from Diego Martin. You're on the air.
Mr. Small, and good morning to the Honorable former Finance Minister. Apologies if my landline giving problems, and we know TSTT is probably going down the drain. Three topical issues. The first one, I want to respond to the Prime Minister on his clapback to the opposition leader on his overseas travel. He said 372 days, and I am contextualizing that as per diem. That equates to $95,000 US of a scarce foreign exchange. And that is how he has to tell us that. And all the additional traveling with him, what benefits to me as a taxpayer that he has brought back to the country. I mean to say, if I go to the bank and I have to line up for 3 hours to get a $50, it is in sync with reality. So nobody is looking at the 100,000 US foreign exchange that he's enjoyed tax-free, putting into his bank account to do what he wants. And I won't say what he might be possibly using it for. The other thing is national awards. I think I feel insulted with it, particularly with the tit for tat with the police commissioners. And I'm going to respond to the two of them getting Chaconia. One of them was the police commissioner during the day of policing. And what he did for that, he did nothing. He has baggage. And the other one, he was in the melee with all those voter pardon and what do you call it, bring them before the courts and prosecution, and all of them was freed. So you had two senior police officers who is directly responsible for where the TTP is today, and you give them national award. So the national award, from my vantage, based on all of that, is not based on meritocracy. And another one I'm going to hit is the former PTA president. She got an award, and if all you know her performance has been zilch, she has not been pounding the pavement for all of those schools that has been destroyed, 95%. She is a failure in that regard. The other one I want to talk, and I have to be very touchy.
Quick.
You see that thing with the issue with the senator? The lady, she's clapped back, and I like women to clap back. But I want the police to find out for me if any of those two have FUS. If they have FUS, because the fact that it reads here and the fact that I'm reading, so then it appears to be serious. So if they got FUL, it's time to go take it back. So nothing untoward's going to happen. And I'm not going to call in, I'm not going to say anything about it. That is my thought on it.
Okay. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, can I respond to the first thing? I think your point about the travel, if it had given us some tangible benefits, I can understand. And the Jindial case is a case in point. I mean, that is so disgraceful for a minister to say that we didn't get the refinery deal with Jindial because of the public thing. They blamed us for the sandals. I mean, it is so disgraceful to use those excuses. You went to India and this man was going to invest in refinery. It looked like he's on a joyride. He's having a good time. I mean, it really does not have a good look. So I agree with you, and I think most people, unless you are P&M till you're dead and you can't see anything else but that, and you're frightened and you lose your contract, and you're frightened you lose your board appointment, and you're frightened you lose your chairmanship, and you're frightened because they're living on fear. This is no carrot environment we live in. We live in a thing of total fear. So I totally agree with you. With regard to the last one, I think you have to understand that, and I'm just not speaking about the individuals, I'm talking about, I taught family law, I wrote a book actually on family law, and one of my chapters is on domestic violence, I think, so I just looked at that before the show. At this point in time, it's interim, which means that no decision has finally been, a matter could be made interim, either because the other party is not there, or because the court needs more information before they make a final protection order. Right. And the time frame between the granting of the interim order, whether because the other party didn't appear or because the court is not satisfied, but is it satisfied enough to give the order? What is going to happen, it's going to have a short period because it is a serious matter. So when you make these kinds of orders, you're taking away freedoms of people, freedom of a person. It's going to be heard in a short time frame, and at that point in time, we will know whether it will either be revoked, dismissed, or it will be enforced. But I don't think we want to deal with these specific persons involved. We don't have the information. I would prefer to leave it at that from a legalistic point of view.
I will refrain. I have comments on both the situation with the Prime Minister's travel and with the commentary of I'll just say this about the commissioners. I just wish the political leader of the NTA did not mention anything. I understand he has a position where he thinks he should have said something. I think he shouldn't have. He should have left it for people like our caller from Digger Martin or members of the media to level that criticism. Coming from him, I think it just seems a little too...
Well, I mean, to be honest, Sean, I didn't even really know all the people who got awards, but it is very clearly very political, and it's very sad that you give people awards not based on their contribution to the country, but rather it's being seen by the public as being a supporter of the party in power, and that is a very sad thing because it's really an abuse and a misuse of the award, and perhaps we should scrap it if that is where it's going.
It's just that I think...
And I don't want to take anything away from some of them who got it.
I think people will view Mr. Griffith's criticisms negatively.
I didn't even know what he said.
He just had issues with the two former commissioners who got awards, and I think he should have let other people say it, and he should have been a little bit more subtle or tact about any comment he made
and look,
on that.
You know what he was? Guess what? The fact that he have you talking about it means he succeeded.
We have San Fernando waiting on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
You know, we're in the dancey jig season, as I call it. Budget is on Monday. And I want to comment on two things. One is the property tax. Prior to Mr. Imbood coming on the Parliament and saying that he mentioned, Mr. Brian Manning, the minister in the ministry, had a press conference, and he said in that press conference interview that he was on that I was surprised that it was missed by a lot of the journalists. He said that out of about 400,000 residential households, they had reached about 175,000. They have sent out, what do you call it? About 175,000, which is not 50% of the rule.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And based on the reason why Mr. extension, it is because they have not reached 50% of the rule. So you can't charge anybody if they don't pay the property tax by the 30th of September. Hence the reason why the extension is there. And a lot of people have missed this because they know they can't charge it. They just give the extension and they keep sending out until they reach 50% because they have not published the rule. The first issue. The second issue I have about the foreign exchange, and it is very disturbing to me what the banks are doing in this country with respect to foreign exchange. When you have a business, right, Karen? You go to the bank, if you want to get foreign exchange to import your stuff, you go to the bank to buy foreign exchange, your invoice or whatever to pay your suppliers. And a lot of people are having problems with foreign exchange, getting foreign exchange, a lot of businesses. So they have turned to quote unquote the black market to get foreign exchange. What the banks are doing, and I'm not asking you all, I'm telling you all what the banks are doing. Mm-hmm. What the banks are doing is they are now offering businesses US dollar loans to pay their bills. So they are lending you the money. Listen to what I'm saying, Sean. Let's say you want 150,000. You go to the bank. They'll give you that for a year. They give you a loan for 150,000. They give you that loan at around 9-10%, which is when you factor the interest in. It is almost like if you're buying in the black market because they are supposed to be the custodian of this foreign exchange, which they already make a profit from when the central bank sells it to them, and you come and you buy it to pay your bills. Mm-hmm. Now on top of that, they are lending it. So the banks have the bank's priority now is to lend the money rather than just sell it to the businesses, and that is unethical. But that is what they are doing. That is what the banks are doing in this country. So they are now part of the problem. They are now compounding people because all they are concerned about now is more profit for themselves. Have a good day, Sean and Karen.
Okay, I just want to say, yes, you made a very good point, the first point, because it is in the legislation. So it's not a question of a policy. It's a policy that's in the Act. It has to reach 50% before the valuation division has to get 50% of the, in terms of residential, on the rule before the minister has the discretion on whether to then see that property tax shall become payable. So if what you said is correct, I didn't see it, that's one point. Yeah. But the other point is, it really speaks to the fact the government has no money. Yes, that's what it is. Yeah. They don't, listen, understand something. I was inside there. Believe you me, and sometimes being inside there gives you a point of view that someone may find difficult to appreciate. You sit down in cabinet, we don't have money. I call him in bird good and say, I need that money before this September this year because the revenue position looking real bad. I'm going to do as if I doing people a favor. If that went to court, I am positive he would have lost. He could not enforce it, even against the persons who paid, because you cannot give me 1 week and have this thing hanging over my head of paying a penalty of 10% if I do not pay it by a certain date. It just was not. And with regard to the second point with the banks lending money, there's just no money because the foreign exchange that you have is going to a small group of people in this country who are not producing anything, but they are retailers and consuming. And even those who say they are producing, in order to produce their beverages or whatever, they say there's 60-something capacity. That's what the central bank says. And that's at the top of the list. That is the beverages and food. Most of the products that can produce it are being brought in, and we are paying foreign exchange. So it's just, let me just tell you, I'm going to put it straight. We don't have any money, and they do have the money for the expenditure. They just don't have it.
Quick thing about property tax, the implementation. I was kind of confused with how it was communicated. It was, at some point, people weren't even sure if it was on. And yes, I lost sight of that 50%.
That's a very good point.
That 50% point.
Yeah,
because we all noticed the government didn't mention anything about that.
That is very true.
So it was obfuscated, and I guess Karen is right with regards to they achieved what they wanted to achieve, to get people to rush to pay. St. James on the line. Good morning, caller. Sorry for the wait. Caller,
Yes,
good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Yes.
I have a question. Probably Karen could throw some light on it. According to what she said, if this had reached the property tax issue, that is, if that had gone up to the Privy Council or some higher, court, this would have been lost, right? Mm-hmm. My question is why didn't the opposition UNC pick up this issue more aggressively? If that would be the key.
Well,
right.
I can't answer for the opposition because you look at the local government. Oh no, there's somebody on their side did take
yes,
that matter
because they wanted to not call the election. So I think they had an issue to raise before
because they saw it as an electoral issue.
Right.
But I'm just saying to you that on two grounds. One, what the former Mrs. San Fernando said, I do recall reading that when they made an amendment to the Property Tax Act, it says that it is only when it reaches 50% or more that then the valuation sends it to the minister, and the minister may then implement it. And if what the minister in the ministry is saying is correct, he did not reach that level. That's number one. Number two, there is no way you can ask I'm positive if it went to the Privy Council. No way you could send me an assessment a week before the deadline and tell me you're going to punish me by paying 10% because I didn't pay it.
So could it be fair that if they try to punish somebody, take punitive measures, then that could have been taken to court?
100%.
But without that, you don't actually have, it's up to you to pay or not.
Fair.
Right. We have, so I think that's what maybe...
and people didn't even get their things. Like, so for me, for instance...
What are you going to do?
You know what, I was just sat down, I said, let me see what they're going to do. Because I want to see how they're going to punish me. I would like to see.
Fear of punishment, I don't know if we could take that to court. We have Shagonas on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. I don't know. Maybe you could. Good morning, caller.
I'm glad Karen is here because I think I asked this question before and never get an answer. They claim that this property tax is local government reform, but I follow the whole local government reform, and I pointed out to you before.
Okay.
Nobody asks or criticizes the law. What is it they wanted? The government property tax to be collected by the regional authority.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the government put up a committee, they examine it. I tell you could buy a copy and say yes. In the end, the government went and changed the law and take away the property tax collection and things from these things. What is the
local?
Yes. Is there any research was done on why it is being hidden?
You're talking about recently or in the past?
Yeah, in the past.
Well, as I said, from the local government reform, they said all they wanted was for the regional authorities to collect.
Right, this is recently, right? Yes.
Examine it and the experts agree with that. And in the end, they do the opposite.
Well,
they take away all the city and Port of Spain, and they went and reviewed the law. Nobody knows who advised them on that. Do we know who advised the government on those amendments to the law? Because that is the cause of the problem as far as I am concerned.
Well, I'm trying to follow that, because when the Property Tax Act in its first iteration, the idea was that everybody should pay the same percentage of tax based on the valuation, which the valuation department would be responsible for, and that was not the case. So the Municipal Corporations Act had something called house rates, and the house rates allow the municipal corporation to charge between 1% to 10%. And for instance, in Port of Spain, which would be a municipal corporation, they charge the highest 10%, but the valuations were based on valuations done in 1970. So the whole idea was to put everybody in under the same requirement.
Yeah, but that don't make sense. And where is this report?
He's talking
there was
about
a reason why the city pays high.
But he's talking about paying, having to pay
right,
the local bodies directly as opposed to the consolidated fund.
Right, and that was an argument that was made even when I was in office.
Where is the report saying these things?
Saying what? No, but it's in the legislation, as far as I can recall reading the legislation, that what they're saying when it comes to residential taxes, that would be the responsibility of the regional corporation.
But it's
and
not
the
right
extent,
now.
No, yeah, but it's not yet, because it has not been passed.
Okay.
It has not been passed. So as it stands now, any monies that they collect by way of property tax is going into the consolidated fund.
Where is the report?
What report is it?
Report with these things?
No, but Professor, I think the point is local government legislation and reform has not been fully implemented or rolled out. So that's the problem right now. There is...
Not the implementation. Where is the basis? You had a research telling you to give the government property tax to the local government. In the end, you take it away.
No, I don't know that they are. Let me just say this. Let me just try to see if
So you're talking about
it.
in the past, you're not talking about currently then? That's why I was asking earlier.
Yes, maybe that's what he's doing, because the Property Tax Act, when it comes, one of the major things that came out of that is that the taxes collected from residential taxes anyhow was initially going to go into the consolidated fund. And I know that the local government minister was not happy about that and felt that the money should go direct.
But where is the report? Where is the advice on that? Because
I don't know how many advice. But that's how governments
all the research when I was in the Ministry of Funds is the most inefficient collector of property tax was the land and buildings, was the government. The best collection was those agencies who collected it themselves. Why do we change that?
But what they intend when they implement, my understanding is, like much laws, the Procurement Act, the Revenue Authority, the Gambling Commission, the National Institute of, the Statistical Institute, there are so many I can talk about that they have been promising.
Where are the reports? Why the public? Why this is hidden the public? And in the proof of my position is they can't get anything right up to now.
Yeah.
Because how can you object on the grounds that you are not properly assessed having regard to your neighbors when the role is not published for the public?
Well,
it's about the publication of the role.
Well, he's moved on to that. No.
Moved on
to the publication of the role. But I think if they don't have 50%,
I think the idea was, no, but he put it in the act. I think it's the Evaluation Act. It's only when they reach 50%, more than 50%, that evaluation division will then have
so why
to send it to the
all
Minister
that?
of Finance.
Nobody criticized the law. What people said, all that simple thing they wanted was the regional authority to get it. Where is it? Is there no documentation on it?
No, well, so currently, just speaking to what's going on currently, they have not implemented the legislation, which I don't know why.
Right now is a mess.
Right.
Well, we agree with that. Okay, you know what?
In this mess.
Okay, we will agree that it is in a mess.
Now, with regards to in the past...
But the question is why?
Why? Because right now, if you want by frank opinion, if I see it from their point of view, right now, if you are sitting in the seat of government and in cabinet, and if you are the Minister of Finance and you're supposed to run it, what your real major concern right now is collection of revenue. And all the problems that you are talking about, all the issues that you are raising.
Now they're working on it.
Yeah, but you don't, yes, but what I'm saying is, because things have gotten that bad. Before, before the natural gas prices were not as bad as they are now. And secondly, Dragon Fuel was going to be the savior. The point is they don't have the revenue. And
you know,
right now,
that was the same reason government interfered with it.
But I'm trying to tell you,
review it, and OPEC raised the side of oil. They said, now we are going ahead.
Well, right now,
basically,
the focus of the government right now is that when the Auditor General gets their revenue and expenditure for the 2020-24 fiscal period, or September 30th is the last day, which is why September 30th was the day which you were given to pay your property tax.
You know, we used to call that a long time.
What is
what mess?
What's that? Well, they don't think it's a mess.
We used to call that putting lagly. You know it's lagly?
Yeah, no, for you catch birds and things, and they stick on the trees.
Right.
Yeah.
They say that we call that putting lagly where you see bird mess. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, but you know what? Okay, I just want to say the one thing that I believe. I agree with you that it is in a mess. I agree with the point that was made in regard to the fact that the 50%, because I saw it in the legislation, 50% was the threshold. I saw that in the legislation. I also have said that it is unreasonable to tell me I have to pay by September the 30th when you give me a week or so to pay it, when that is not how it is done. And furthermore, when I haven't even gotten an assessment. But right now, I'm telling you, if I were in government and I was a minister like that minister that you have there, and that leader that you have there, and his acolytes that he has around him, I am saying that all they are concerned about is that when they give the budget on September the 30th, the revenue is not going to look as bad as it could be. And that is why they are doing what they are doing. That is my considered opinion. And then afterwards, all these things that you are raising, they're going to have to deal with it. But all he wants to know is that he can reach that revenue position so that when he gives the budget and the Auditor General gives a report, that he could say that this was the revenue that they collected for that period. That is what he's interested in.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Professor.
You understand what I'm saying?
I think they're not even going to be incentivized to clean up the mess unless they win the next election. I won't be surprised if they don't have an issue leaving the mess, because look, procurement, they kind of left it to the incoming Rowley administration to actually finish it off and implement it properly. Yeah, they passed the act, but it wasn't actually implemented, right? And we got what we got, thanks to that. Now, okay, we have to close things off there, but I will wrap up with saying, with regards to the Prime Minister's travel, I'll just say this. In theory, a lot of the travel was with regards to economic reasons and international oil this and conference that. The one blemish to that is the fact that when Guyana was like, hey, we want to have a conference on energy, apparently we had a more important trip to go somewhere else.
Europe. It was
cool, right? and while on the surface, you know, I could say, okay, it's good to go to these things, as Karen and Nicola said, but it doesn't seem like we get anything out of it. More importantly, I understand, Mr. Prime Minister, that you have to do your health checkups. You want to do it abroad because apparently our public health system is not good enough for an elected official.
Public or private,
right?
Apparently.
Well, right. So my thing is, and listen, I don't fault you for that. I would just like to know, I'm curious, I'm not saying it's bad or it's good or whatever. I would just like to know, when I know people that have to go abroad, including church groups that might want to go abroad or family or whatever, it's always well, come today to get a little bit of foreign exchange today and a little bit of foreign exchange next week and blah, 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 and you have all this run around, right? So I would like to know, to some extent, your private health concerns are not technically government business. Did you have to go through the same run around to get your foreign exchange?
But he's
to see
the
your
Prime
needs?
Minister, but the thing is, you know what that is? It's a lack of trust there is a lack of confidence and a lack of, by the public in this government, bottom line. That is what it is. And many people sit down in their homes and sit down in quiet corners and say the same thing over and over again, but there's also fear operating because they know that if they say anything, they won't get a, what is the order of the Republic of any kind of
Exactly.
But if you stay on the right side, you will get it. It has reached a point in this country where people are operating by fear. This government has lost the confidence and trust of the people, and those of us who remain with a head in the sand is because out of fear or we're getting something from it.
It's worse than that. We tout our independence as a nation, while too many of our citizens want to be dependent on the government. But
the government likes it, so you don't understand.
I know that.
You must understand that too, you know.
And the problem is too many of the citizens like it so as well.
But why wouldn't I, if my father going to take care of me, and take care of me, and take care of me, and take care of me, unless I'm a...
It's fine, assuming my father isn't also abusing me.
Well, that's a form of abuse. Anyway, that's another conversation.
With that said, I want to thank all the callers.
Right off of the economy.
Want to thank all the callers. I'm just borrowing one of your euphemisms. Anyway, we thank all the callers. Thanks to the good lady for joining me, as always. Looking forward to this budget. I want to see if we're going to get a three-peat of the whole business as usual. Nothing to see here.
Of course, inflation is great.
Of course, yes.
Yes, and foreign exchange is wonderful.
Just wait,
we have lots of revenue.
Just
and TTR is going wonderful.
Listen, inflation is also great in the UK, except the high food prices remain. Right? So just wait for that dam to bust, right? In a year or two about food prices globally. Just wait. Folks, I want to remind you to make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would always say. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe out there. Still, just always keep a small thought for dengue and your health. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.